Cool. Okay. Look, I think we will get going. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And it's great to be here to talk about being boardroom ready, making confident CEO level decisions about your digital strategy. And the aim for today's session is to help organizations that are engaging with their boards around digital investments, digital strategy, digital changes to be effective communicators and really get the most out of critical engagements with boards when they are planning and preparing for these kinds of initiatives. We have three speakers this morning. I'm Jeremy Jaley. I'm Business Development Lead here at Smart Impact, coming to you from what is admittedly a slightly gloomy West Sussex this morning. So I'm hoping that this webinar might blow out the February cobwebs a little bit, maybe even inspire a little bit of spring optimism, but maybe we're a little bit early in the year to be thinking too much in that way. In terms of myself, I work with all of our clients when they are preparing for digital initiatives with Smart Impact, and particularly when they're putting in place digital strategies. And that very often engages engaging directly with boards or supporting chief executives and senior directors in membership organisations to engage with their boards on these kind of topics. The main event this morning is to hear from Matt Dunphy, who is an independent consultant to not-for-profit organisations and our guest this morning. Matt, it's fantastic to have you with us. You work with a large number of membership organisations and charities, and so have quite prolific experience of engaging with boards on digital strategy, ensuring organisations are well prepared for digital change and transformation, and ensuring that digital projects deliver on their objectives, so providing assurance and benefit realization as a key service. So it's absolutely brilliant, Matt, to have you with us. And last but absolutely not least, we're joined by Chris Lightley, who's a functional consultant here at Smart Impact and someone that regularly works with senior leaders in membership organizations as a bit of a digital whisperer, so helping to make digital technologies accessible, talking to folks in the language of outcomes and business benefits, and ensuring that organizations are getting the most out of the technologies that they are using. So I want to say a few quick words about Smart Impact just to set the scene. We are CRM and engagement specialists that work exclusively with professional membership organisations. And that means we support professional bodies, trade associations, trade unions, regulators and membership-based societies and charities to maximise their relationships with their members, to personalise and tailor communications and services, to deliver exceptional online experiences to members and other stakeholders, and ultimately to use automation and AI to make complex processes such as applications, CPD management, training, renewals, certifications, events, as straightforward to administer as they can be. And as per the slide, we're very proud to be regularly recognised as leaders in this space, and because of that exclusive focus on the challenges facing membership organisations, we're very proud to be working with some of the most prestigious associations and societies in the UK and Ireland, so have quite a lot of experience that we can draw on. Look, a few quick words around webinar etiquette. The session's going to be recorded, so please don't feel that you have to sit there taking copious amounts of notes. If you have any questions for us, please use the chat box. So there's a Q&A session that you can access, pop any questions in there, and at the end of the session we're going to make sure there's a bit of time to answer any questions. And as I say, we'll try and do that at the end. But if something comes up that is relevant as we're going, we'll also try to respond to that in good time. So look, in terms of today's agenda, we're going to start with why a boardroom ready digital strategy matters, and also how and in what circumstances senior leaders in membership organisations end up talking with and to their boards about digital strategy, what that looks like in practice, what you're there and what you need to do to make that as effective as possible. And then Matt is going to pick that up and really deep dive into some hints and tips, pointers and practical ways that you can bring digital strategy to life, engaging with senior stakeholders. We're then going to move to a kind of fireside chat, draw on some of the experiences and insights that we have both from Matt and also at Smart Impact around making sure that these kinds of engagements are as effective as they possibly can be. And then, as I said, making sure that we have plenty of time for audience Q&A at the end. So without further ado, let me get into the introduction, and I want to start by setting the scene for why we're even talking about this topic today and why it really matters at board and executive level, particularly in membership organisations. And I think the first thing to say is that digital is no longer a support function or a back office concern. For most organisations, it's absolutely fundamental to how they operate, how they deliver services and value, and how they achieve their strategy. And that is especially true for membership organisations. Digital is increasingly how members experience you. It's how they join, how they engage, how they access services, and how they decide whether you remain relevant to them over the time. And also, the reality is that their expectations are shaped by the best digital experiences that they are having anywhere, not just when working with professional associations in very particular contexts. And yet what we see time and time again is organisations being held back, not because they don't care about digital or lack ideas, but because their digital estates aren't evolving in a coherent and deliberate way. And normally that comes down to the absence of a clear digital strategy, because without one, investments and investment decisions become tactical rather than strategic. Digital tools that are core to an organisation's operations are consistently underfunded or perhaps left to go to pasture. Change initiatives struggle because there isn't a shared understanding of objectives, and lots of good ideas and intentions fail to translate into outcomes that genuinely move organisations forward. And crucially, that isn't usually a delivery problem. It's usually about leadership and governance. Because when boards and senior teams aren't clearly owning or sponsoring digital strategy, digital can drift, particularly when it's sitting between committees, other priorities, competing pressures. And the result is either lots of momentum without direction or lots of caution without progress. So that's why it's so important for organisations to embed digital properly into their core organisational strategies, or put in place a clear board-sponsored digital strategy of its own that works alongside and complements the main strategy of the organisation. And to do that, senior executives need to be able to engage with their boards with confidence to create understanding, alignment, and ultimately buy-in. So that's what we mean by being boardroom ready. So if we take a step on from the why, the next question is, how does the conversation generally end up in boardrooms? Well, in practice, senior executives usually engage their boards on digital strategy for one of four reasons. The first is investment. You may be asking for funding, sometimes significant funding, and that means being able to articulate return on investment in a way that resonates at board level, not just costs and savings, but value, outcomes, and supporting confidence. The second is senior level commitment. Digital initiatives almost always cut across teams, budgets, and ways of working. To succeed, they need visible sponsorship and alignment from the top. That's less about approval and more about winning hearts and minds, answering the unspoken question of what does this mean for us personally and collectively as an organisation. Third will inevitably be risk management. That might be about managing existing risks, data protection, privacy, resilience, or it might be about responding to a much more complex external environment. So cyber threats, regulatory pressure, reputational risk. Boards are rightly sensitive about these topics, and digital strategy is now inseparable from how organisations manage their risks responsibly. And finally, thinking about growth opportunities. That could mean launching new services, improving member experience, or fundamentally changing how the organisation operates, including adopting new tools like AI to work more efficiently or differently. What we've seen is that there are also some important contextual dynamics that sit underneath and around these topics of conversation. So very often the person doing the persuading, a chief executive or senior leader, isn't a digital specialist. So they're being asked to lead a conversation in a domain that may not be their natural home while still sounding confident and credible. And at the same time, digital strategy doesn't always feel that exciting to boards. Board members are usually deeply motivated by the mission of the organisation, by the profession or the sector or industry itself, not by technology for its own sake. And if you add to that competing priorities and limited time, it's easy to see why digital discussions can drift or lose momentum, which is why the how really matters. Presentations and discussions need to be compelling, grounded, and clearly linked to what boards care about most, because there's no doubt about the scale and importance of this. In 2026, most organisations are going to be spending between 3 and 10% of their total expenditure on digital tools and initiative. So that alone makes digital strategy a board level issue, whether organisations choose to treat it as one or not. So having talked about why these conversations matter, it's then worth being honest about what actually gets in the way when digital strategy reaches the boardroom. There are some challenges here that are common to almost every organisation, regardless of sector or whether they're for profit or not for profit. So unlocking investment is one. Boards are quite rightly cautious and risk aware, which can make approval slow or difficult, particularly when benefits feel long term or indirect. There's the simple issue of time. Board agendas are crowded, and when digital does make it onto the agenda, it often doesn't give the quality discussion that it deserves. And then you can add to that quite often unrealistic expectations, assumptions that digital change is quicker, cheaper, or simpler than it really is, or bias over priorities where certain topics or initiatives attract more attention than others. As I said, those challenges exist everywhere, but in membership organisations, they're often compounded. So historically, many membership bodies have underinvested in digital, which means that today's initiatives can feel disproportionately large or risky, even when they're very long overdue. Boards are also frequently voluntary. People are generous with their time, but time is limited, and that makes sustained, detailed engagement harder. Change itself often runs more slowly in membership organisations. Decision making can be committee led, traditions and values matter, and volunteer structures add complexity. That can make digital transformation feel frustratingly incremental, even when progress is being made. And finally, there's the issue of pet projects. Passion is a strength in membership organisations, but it can also pull discussions away from agreed priorities, especially when individual interests aren't aligned with the wider strategy. Now, look, none of this is about blame. It's just about context. Understanding these dynamics helps executives anticipate where conversations may drift, stall, or become emotionally charged, and to help them to steer those discussions back towards decisions, action, and clarity, which is why the real skill here for the chief executive or director is holding two ideas at once, sharing the art of the possible and the vision of what they're trying to achieve, whilst also educating boards on the reality of what's achievable and by when. So I think this is the point where all of this comes together. I'm not going to step on the more practical guidance that Matt's going to share next, but there is one principle that consistently makes the difference when executives engage boards on digital strategy. And it's this: successful conversations don't try to make boards care about digital, they frame digital in terms of what boards already care about. So over many years of working with senior leaders around board level approvals of digital strategy, we've seen this repeat again and again. And the conversations that land are almost always anchored in three things. So the first is risk management. For boards of membership organisations, particularly those with long, prestigious histories and strong international representations, managing risk is fundamental. Digital risk shows up in very real ways: service outages that affect revenue, data breaches that damage trust, growing technical debt that quietly increases exposure, or misuse of data that creates reputational harm. So, framed well, digital strategy becomes a way of reducing exposure and avoiding future problems, not creating new ones. Second is value creation. I think this is where digital moves from defensive to strategic. Boards are naturally focused on the core of the organisation, protecting and growing membership, controlling costs, and extending member value. And digital plays directly into all of that, whether that's improving how members join and engage, reducing the cost and fragility of running an organisation, or enabling new services, connections, and revenue opportunities that weren't previously viable. So when value is articulated in those terms, digital stops being abstract and starts being really relevant. And third is assurance. Boards carry legal and moral responsibility for ensuring organisations are well run, resilient, and future ready. Digital strategy plays a critical role here, particularly in 2026, strengthening governance, improving resilience, supporting compliance, and helping organisations avoid sleepwalking into obsolescence. And it also touches on softer but equally important issues: being a good organisation to work with by making people's lives easier, operating responsibly, and remaining credible in the eyes of members and stakeholders. So when executives frame digital strategy through these lenses, risk, value, and assurance, they can create a clear line of sight between digital initiatives and board priorities. And that's the shift. Not here's why digital matters, but here's how digital supports what already matters most to our organisation. And that's what turns digital strategy from a hard sell into a meaningful board conversation, which is where we are going to head next with Matt. But before we do, we've got a very quick poll. I'm going to look in your direction, Chris, to make sure that the poll pops up for everyone. But our question is: how would you describe your board's current approach to digital change? We've got a few options there: supportive with appropriate controls, cautious but balanced, risk averse and slow, or inconsistent, depends on the topic. Feeling I know which way this is going to go.
Go on, Jeremy. Do you want to try and make a guess? What do you think takes the lead?
Well, you know what? I can see the results coming in, and actually, it sort of started the way I thought it was going to go, Chris. But it seems to have become more stable in a way. So I thought inconsistent, depending on the topic. You know, what I see a lot in organisations is pet projects or pet topics dominating board agendas when a more strategic approach is necessary. But it's good to see that sort of supportive level of control is there. But I'm not surprised to see that inconsistency is also recognised. Brilliant. I'm going to close that, and Matt, if I can hand over to you to talk about hints and tips.
So to linger here for a moment, my name's Matt Dunphy. I'm an independent consultant, often collaborating with Smart Impact around these webinar engagements. Really pleased to see us looking at what I think we would call a senior leadership topic today. And I think for a little bit more context, after a lot of helpful information from Jeremy, some of this will be practical tips and guidance tactics about how you can engage with your board for successful approval of digital strategy and successful engagements, events around how your strategy is being executed. So we really want to say we expect a learned audience here, However, this might indeed be a reminder on some of these key principles. So I think if we move on to the next slide then, Jeremy's giving you a lot there in terms of framing the challenges we often find at board and their focus. But again, just to give you another angle on this, often what we find, and in my experience engaging with various boards, it can take some time to actually establish what the key problems are we are facing in order to then create effective solutions. And I think in digital terms, or on digital strategy, often what we find is it takes time to really align on the priorities. So what areas of our digital strategy do we need to focus on most or first in order to be successful? And of course, being a board, how are we going to see results quickly? How are we going to move to better outcomes as soon as possible? So often we think, as a general principle, it's worth lingering around how the problems are being described or discussed and how you can clarify those before you start to table your digital strategy and proposals. So again, moving on from there, and we're going to have a look at some things that will help in this sphere. So if we look to a couple of these practical tips and guidance next, Jeremy. So we want to kind of give you a primer or reminder on what really works. So, what can mean a strategy gets approved and is well received by your board? Well, generally having a vision, and not only having a vision, but actually discussing that with your senior leadership team, with other stakeholders about how much it presents a compelling story to your audience. I think generally in life things are much better received when you've considered those factors. So you've worked out how what we aim to deliver is coming across. And there are various storytelling techniques you can actually deploy or research that will help with that. But I think it's just making sure you don't sort of deliver a business case or a strategy that seems quite vanilla and lacks context. And the other thing is to go for high quality relationships. There's actually a lot of theory and literature around board dynamics, and it does tend to focus on high quality relationships. Now that doesn't mean you have lots of time, as Jeremy has stated, with these volunteer individuals, but it does mean you use your time effectively when you get those opportunities. So if it's still post-COVID a corridor conversation, or you get a quick Teams call with your chair, for example, it's knowing exactly what you need to say to them about the upcoming strategy that might actually appeal to their incentives, to what matters to them. And again, as Jeremy said, that might be matters of risk, value creation, or assurance. Looking on from there, I always find this is effective. We do get pressure from our boards to push progress and to move quickly, as well as economically. But I think as long as you're able to negotiate around trade-offs, you should get sound approval and an understanding of what you're dealing with as leaders. And by that, I mean, you might be able to say, well, look, we can push quicker on this digital strategic initiative. We might need some more investment for external support or augmented internal resources. Or indeed, we may well be able to focus on these areas of digital strategy in the next year, but there are other initiatives you've mentioned that might need to be deprioritised or will take longer. So you're really actively discussing challenges with them in the context of trade-offs, And then finally, probably a reminder for us all, me included, keep it simple, keep your messaging simple. And the example I've placed in here is around return on investment. So if you invest this range of budget, we believe we will deliver X and Y key outputs and outcomes for the organisation. And always saying, what the member will see, what the donor will see, what your stakeholders will benefit from, obviously is key. But just keeping things nice and simple. And I think just the top tip there is, smart impact is certainly amenable and available to support with these strategic discussions and with the kind of positioning of digital strategy. Very, very experienced in doing that. So if we look further from there to some other tips we might describe, for anyone who's done some broader reading, this idea of powerful questions comes from a world thinker called Lisa Bedell, from a book called Kill the Company. Now, she's not suggesting you go home and try to destruct your organisation. Jeremy mentioned this word obsolescence before. It's looking at the vulnerabilities in your organisation, or indeed in your digital strategy, and talking to your senior leadership group talking to key members of your organization, asking powerful questions about how you can strengthen a business case, a strategy, your delivery objectives. I'll give you a couple of examples on screen, and I really do suggest some of these questions don't get asked. You know, in the not-for-profit, we have somewhat a reticence about commerciality, but you know, asking where are we behind right now? Where are we behind our competitors, if they do truly exist, or certainly our near neighbours who may indeed be getting a membership fee where we aren't. So asking of our colleagues, you know, where we feel like we're most behind helps us work out how we can actually recover. And what's halting progress? That's a 3-word question. And what you might find is you get 2 answers. You might get more technical answers, which you can build into the evidence base for your strategy around systems and processes that aren't working right now. And more often not, you might actually get some feedback around culture. So the way we're working or the way we're addressing change at the moment isn't helping us. We need to look to better change management practice or actually doing some cultural work before we start a digital strategy and its initiatives. So that's a couple there. Certainly looking at where can we get ahead, and sometimes I feel like this is being behind, so it's kind of a catch up and keep up tactic. But asking people, where are the quick wins in what we're about to do? And I think I hear boards describe this as what's going to shift the dial. So, you know, if you've got a 2-year strategy, you're going to need to promise an early release of some benefits, both for your external stakeholders and for your people. So really asking the questions about where, you know, if we inject some investment and some digital technology, where are we going to see results quite quickly? I think it's really important to frame. A last one on there, just to say, I do think in our sector there is some reticence about benefits realization and actual tracking. So I think talking to your colleagues, particularly in finance, about where you can prove hard return on investment is crucial, because many of your board members may have a financial or commercial background. They will ask about that. So the key point you see at the bottom there is about candor. It is about setting up a safe space in meetings or in engagements with your team or your teams around what they really think. You know, you will get candor if you offer trust around some of these things. Moving on from there then, we've added this one because we feel like it's around, it still gets discussed, and the word we say on screen is boards can get somewhat befuddled about exactly how you're going to deliver and when they expect results and releases. So a simple rule of 3 here for actually structuring delivery inside your digital strategy. We say that big bang or single launches are often most effective when you are addressing key strategic risk. So you have systems that you need to decommission, or you have software applications that are approaching or at end of life, end of service, end of support. Really, really effective in that way. The second one there is we would generally say use phases. You know, structure several releases of software or technology along your strategic line, so that you can, again, prove benefits realization early, share that you've actually delivered a new website, let's say, and some of the other elements are to come. But what it means is you can also structure budget in some circumstances, so you can have investment kind of gateway reviews, or even if you get your investment up front, you can use these gateways to discuss key progress and lessons learned. So it generally feels like you chunk up change in a different way that is usually very effective. And number 3 there, I generally find we still see some challenges in the sector around organisations that have delivered a big project, whether it's big bang or several phases. They go into a stabilisation mode and they don't discuss the continuous improvement model. And one hint about Smart Impact and other technology suppliers, this approach really helps a supplier because they can continue to offer you the support desk and ongoing query support. However, they can balance the resource that you need from them to keep delivering and keep expanding your digital technology and its ecosystem. So it's really worth considering upfront how you're going to continue to improve your systems once you've launched some key elements. Again, we'll keep going there, so that's phasing. Just a very quick note, John Prescott of the Smart Impact team has released this brilliant article. I have read it, and there's a QR code on screen if you want to grab it now. Again, just to return to this idea that often around these digital strategy initiatives, The tech can either get blamed or the tech can be seen as a silver bullet solution. And what John's talking about in his article is actually that the problems usually lie deeper than that. You know, as I've said before, if you really talk to your people, the problems around technology are usually process led. And they are actually led in terms of culture and ways of working as well. So things have built up over time that need unknitting or untangling. Or even they're just wider factors about where the organisation is at the moment, and how we can actually address change given your broader context. So it's a really great article, but it does focus on actually as leaders, how are we investigating where the problems truly lie, and actually fitting technology solutions to solve problems rather than sort of assuming the tech will do everything for you. And then just finally moving on, I'm sure all of you are versed in measuring progress, whether it's an established set of KPIs or just some key markers you can discuss with your leadership team and with your functions. But what we wanted to do here is just surface what we call digitally driven KPIs. I do think there is a need in our sectors to actually focus more and more on results, because that's what proves the return on our investment. That means that there's a higher trust at board level and we'll get investment in future. So you'll know these, but just to highlight their value again, you know, doing some work around metrics in terms of your brand awareness, loyalty, identity, trust, really gives you that external horizon scan of what people think about you, how willing they are to be members or donors. Reach, we all know about reach and sort of getting to more people to share our mission and receive support. But certainly, is reach healthy across all of your different digital channels? You know, you can really track that, and it is about having a broad base of influence across various channels rather than just focusing on one or two. Conversion, again, we all know we must convert people to membership or to regular donors with us, but really in terms of using digital tools to support this, it's actually understanding, you know, how our funnels work online. You know, okay, we might have a very bright website, but is it technically fit to actually create funnels that bring people to key calls to action and actually convert people into from opportunities into established members and owners? So actually doing some technical work to understand that more and more and to measure that and track it is really crucial. And then finally, then in terms of retention, again, we are obsessed about retention. But the one thing I'd say, and certainly it's an appeal in smart impact technology, as I know it, is you can actually look upstream at earlier engagement levels with newer members who are nurturing, donors who are new to you, and actually seeing the health of your ability to retain them there so that you can take action before that later moment where they just lapse and it's much more difficult to get them back. So the key here is about establishing these digitally driven KPIs. And just finally, we've not mentioned AI much today. That's probably a good thing given how much is out there. But just to say on AI, it's really helping us measure things like time emotion studies in a new way, or actually really push the performance in our service level agreements as well. So I think we're going to move to a second poll, and then we're going to have a fireside chat with Jeremy and back with Chris. So really, this goes to Lisa Bedell and this idea of assessing as leaders your current strategy at the moment. Where is it most weakest? And you can see these key themes here. It might be in how you're describing or addressing strategic risk. It might be how you're highlighting or not highlighting value creation based on the investment you'll be given. It may actually just be lacking a little more detail about how technology you're introducing is actually going to make you more compliant or offer more risk assurance. Again, what we'd love is, if we've not heard so much from you on chat, if you've got another suggestion about where your strategy is weak at the moment, we'd love to hear that as well. So Chris, thank you for launching the poll. You let me know maybe when the results are ready. And I do, again, encourage people to drop in a comment if they think their strategy is vulnerable in another area than to what we've described.
Cool, Matt. Just in terms of results, I don't know if you can see them on your screen, but I think we have a very clear leader with the ability to highlight the value the investment will create. I think it's come across as 75% of respondents, which is probably quite predictable as well in some regards.
Yes, I mean, if you're reflecting, do drop some other suggestions in chat. But on value creation, I couldn't agree more. I think I sometimes adopt things from the commercial sector, but the idea of a value stream, a value chain, where what you're doing actually offers value to your members or donors versus where it doesn't. You need to do it because you're a regulatory organization, or where it's just waste. Having this focus on where you're actually creating real value and having an evidence base for that is going to land very, very well with your boards. If it's absent, it's going to present awkward questions when it matters, when you're trying to gain approval. And of course, data is really key. Learning more about your stakeholders and what they value through your data as well. Great, so 75%, that's a lot. Okay, we're going to move to fireside chat now. I think gents, Jeremy and Chris, we've got probably, I would suggest a little over 10 minutes, but we've got a suite of questions to ask you both. Are you ready to share your insight?
I think so, Matt. I wish I was genuinely sitting next to a fire, but yeah, looking forward to doing it.
Exactly, we should try one of these with a roasting fire behind at some point. So I think, Jeremy, I'm going to start with you. I think people may know Smart Impact as an award-winning technology provider, and might think the focus is on solutions, but maybe paint the picture of how you actually offer strategic support around boardroom discussions for us.
Yeah, by all means, Matt. I think, look, to be a valued partner, you've got to be operating at that level. Organisations are looking from key technology providers, and we very often are the organisation that is building and supporting a business's CRM. So, right at the center of an organization's engine in terms of data management and stakeholder engagement. They're looking for that organization not just to be someone who is good with the technology, but also someone who can contribute to discussions about the business and how best to support the business with modern digital tools. So I think there are three areas where we bring things to the table. Strategic advice, so using our experience to sort of bring strategy to boards. Best practice guidance around technology, and of course access to resources and our experience. So if I just start with strategic advice, that tends to be focused on a few areas. So translation of technology into strategic benefits is really, really important. So we're helping organizations to remain focused on outcomes and why they're investing in technology in the first place. So really a focus on the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we investing? What are we trying to achieve? That helps to avoid just doing technology projects for technology's sake, and it helps organizations to really be thinking about the relationship with their members, the benefits that they're trying to deliver as front and center. The next is that support with board engagement. So very much what we are talking about today. Sometimes that's helping leaders to talk confidently about technology and digital concepts. As I said earlier, quite often the people that are leading these conversations aren't technology specialists, but need to be able to talk the talk, to be able to provide assurance and confidence when engaging. Another critical area is support with realistic budgeting and managing expectations. I think, as you alluded to, Matt, sometimes, boards want payoff really, really quickly. They want to make an investment and to get results straight away. Whereas when you're actually implementing new technologies or new strategies, it takes a while for that payback to be achieved. And so making sure that there's a realistic expectation, helping organizations to talk about that and set clear sort of ground rules, really, really important. And not forgetting internal effort as well. Quite often complex digital projects require a lot of internal effort. They require staff's time and attention to be focused on that initiative. And then finally, I'm glad you made such a big point of this in your section, benefits realization. It's really, really critical that if organizations are making significant investments in technology or setting about on ambitious digitalization or digital transformation projects, that they're measuring the impact of those projects. And what I see quite a lot is organizations very excited about setting off on a project, it being quite a a hard process, and for that reason, at the end of the project, them kind of not looking back and saying, well, have we achieved what we set out to achieve in undertaking this project? And if you miss that, you miss the whole point of doing it in the first place, and you've got nothing to celebrate when you get through the difficult phase of delivering a project. So managing that benefits realization is really important. I think I want to bring Chris in. So, Chris, the second area where we can really help is around best practice guidance around technology. And I think that's something that you do every single day, one way or another. So, how are we supporting organizations in that arena?
Yeah, I think one of the important things when picking a supplier is understanding how much work they've done, obviously in the industry, but also with similar and what Matt was saying, your neighbors in the space. And I think that as implementation partners, we learn the hurdles and we overcome those hurdles together with the organization that we work with. And as a result, we can see around the corners very often in terms of where bottlenecks and where problems are going to occur. And I think one of the most valuable things you can get from a partner is not just the technology that they can implement, it's that ability to have learned from what other organizations have done and take those benefits. So not having to learn the hard way through your own implementation, being able to take those lessons that have been learned from other implementations and apply them to your implementation, I think is really cool. That is both from a technology that gets delivered in other projects and being able to leverage that technology that gets built, but also just from a consultancy and guidance point of view, both at board decision level and implementation stage as well.
That's wonderful. And I think, thank you both. I mean, the highlights for me are benefits realization. I think if you're in a program setting, you can tend to focus a bit more there, but certainly in change projects, it could just feel like that gets lost. So I think as leaders, our focus on that is crucial because it is what matters. It's the first thing, how do you know you've created value? Well, you have a tracking of benefits. And Chris, thank you. You remind me that actually one of the smart impacts or technology suppliers benefits for an organization is we've done this similarly before recently with another organization like Blue. It allows them to adopt some quick wins actually based on what you've already done in your solution.
Yeah,
And Matt, I think that's really important, actually. The sort of third big area that we can bring to the table is access to resources and experience from that work with other organizations. So we can provide access to partners. We do a lot at Smart Impact with Microsoft, for instance. Microsoft are really doing a huge amount in AI at the moment. And so we're able to access insights from Microsoft around AI, which are really, really valuable to boards who are grappling quite rightly with how are they going to take advantage of the opportunities such a sort of seismic and game-changing technology can provide. We like to provide access to our senior team and their experience because the people that lead our business have been working with membership organizations for many years, and so can bring a lot of empathy and a lot of insight to the table that really makes things become a lot realer and more human when you talk about what it's actually going to feel like managing a digital initiatives. We've got access to other clients who've been through similar programs, and so introducing clients to each other, making sure that lessons are learned, making sure that there's a sort of shared experience around these kinds of initiatives, really important. And then of course insights into what has worked in similar organizations as well. And I think those things, I mean, look, I'm very conscious that all these things are sort of like things that Smart Impact can do, but I think they're invaluable to boards because getting that kind of human insight really important when you're thinking about this kind of topic.
Yes, and I think we'll keep going for a bit, but thank you both for that. Again, Microsoft is the key takeaway for me. If your strategy is Microsoft, a company like Smart Impact really translates an awful lot about how things work in detail. It can be daunting, just exactly what Microsoft's delivering and what its ambitions are. So, Jeremy, maybe briefly from you, if there are conversations at board level that you're hearing that you weren't hearing, say, 4 or 5 years ago, that you're helping leadership teams with, what are they? Give us the highlights of what's new. And I suppose AI is a blanket term, but what within that might be the conversations right now?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Matt, in the context of the overall presentation, I think there are a lot of eternal topics that boards continually want to talk about, right? So there's how do we manage risk? How do we make sure that we're getting the most from investments and budgeting appropriately? Quite rightly, in 2026, organisations are very concerned about data protection and privacy, and quite often in the membership sector, going above and beyond in terms of best practice around those things so that they can demonstrate to industry and the sector what good looks like. I think we've got to remember that associations have a really important role in doing that. And I suppose it's new, but I mean, people are increasingly concerned around the risks from threats from cyber, making sure that you've got a really secure system, that the system's resilient. What happens if you do have an attack? How do you deal with that, etc. So those kind of eternal risk orientated topics still very much on board agendas. And then I think more of the same in a way. There are themes that seem to be recurring, if not secular, in their nature, in that they sort of seem to come back over and over again. Automation, it actually is one that I think has been massively re-stimulated by AI. Organizations, so this is senior leaders and boards, want to make their businesses as efficient as they possibly can, and so are looking for ways to automate what they're doing. And I think when people look at AI, one of the very obvious things that comes to mind is, well, surely AI can massively impact this. It can do some of the heavy lifting. It can get rid of busy work. It can make organizations better. So I think AI has really re-stimulated recently conversations about automation, but actually automation has been something that people have been talking about for years and years and years. Another one is investments in internal and external teams. And again, I think AI is having a big impact on sort of wider thinking around this. So there's been a tension for a long time within all organizations, I imagine, but particularly in large membership organizations, around whether or not they need to bring in specialist suppliers to help them deliver programs of work, or whether they should be investing in their internal teams to do that. I think AI is providing an opportunity for organizations to think more about, well, couldn't we do more internally, which I think is quite heartening. It should be a big benefit of AI. What we quite often remind folks is that actually to do that, you've really got to get some fundamentals in place. You've got to have a good data strategy. You've got to make sure that you understand what your business processes are and that they're working well. And only when you have those things can you really start taking advantage of the opportunities AI provides. I mean, Chris, let me look in your direction as well. I mean, you're already doing a huge amount of sleeves rolled up AI work on a day-to-day basis. What are you seeing that's being interesting to boards in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI has opened a whole new door in terms of member self-service. I think this has been something that organizations might have thought that they were too small to actually need something like that, a full-on case management system or a dedicated team to help members understand the values or the upgrade paths in terms of managing their membership. But I think AI is unlocking a lot of that kind of functionality at the moment. So the ability to guide members through renewal processes or rejoining if they're a lapsed member. We're seeing a lot of that kind of stuff being made possible, both for large organizations who already have an incumbent membership team and support team, but also to add value to smaller organizations as well. And I think that is actually where AI is going to become the most valuable. Is I think a lot of people think that AI is an enterprise level solution that only big organizations can benefit from. But I actually think that the most benefit is going to come to smaller organizations, and not just for client face or member facing stuff like self-service, but to be able to make their own team far more efficient in terms of creating things like marketing collateral or just adding value to their members. I think that's a really exciting area of AI at the moment.
And I think I might jump in. Thank you so much, sir. I think I got a new colour on AI today. That's really great, Chris, that actually there is a risk that it's seen only for larger organisations or more ready organisations. I think the benefit for a tight team that's really challenged resource-wise is also very apparent. Jeremy, I might close, but with a fun sort of rapid fire question. If you cast your memory back, what is the single oddest request you've ever been given, either directly or by proxy of a client from a board? And how did you manage what was probably a very odd situation?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Matt. And in a way, every single engagement with boards has the potential, at least, if not actually materializing in something really off the wall or wacky, of sort of presenting that. And I'll give you some examples. I think that there's a bit of a curse of good intentions, in a lot of particularly smaller membership organizations. I guess when you get into bigger organizations, it tends to be a little bit more corporate, just sort of by the very nature. But in smaller organizations, you've often got people who have real pet projects. They're really interested in a particular thing. You quite often get people who have designed the system that organizations are currently using, right? So a lot of investment into a particular way of working, and therefore from the board, from the sort of chief executive or leadership team's perspective, sort of winning the hearts and minds and getting people away from those kind of pet project hobby horses is really important. But quite often I think there's two things, right? There's sort of crazy expectations on the one hand, and then there's trying to use technology in a way that it's just not intended to be used, or perhaps using the wrong technology for what people are trying to do. So around expectations, quite often, being realistic, we go into conversations with organizations that want a new CRM, new portal, new website, new community forum, a new mobile app, a new learning management system, a new finance system, and all of their processes to be completely automated. And they want that in a single project, and they want it for 5 or 10K or something, right? And so reality just hasn't caught up with the board around the amount of work that is required to deliver that kind of change, or that level of sort of systems investment, nor around the realities of the true cost of delivering it. So that kind of crazy expectation management is probably one side of it. As I said, people in organizations trying to use systems the wrong way. It's a bit of a sideways thought, but I quite often have seen this being particularly difficult when someone in a position of authority, like a chair, is the person who's driving that agenda. So we've had all sorts of requests for databases that are of publications or photos or vast quantities of financial data that have absolutely nothing to do with what we do, which is around membership engagement. And trying to talk people around from that, or that's not something that you can actually help them to deliver, becomes really difficult, because people are just absolutely obsessed. But as I say, it's not so much that the oddest request, it's the fact that the propensity for that odd request or difficult requests to come up is very high, and why it's so important that senior leaders are prepared to sort of manage and address misunderstandings, address problems. And that quite often takes courage. It really does. It requires a sort of firm hand on the tiller kind of approach to addressing those challenges.
Yes, and that might be our summary. I think without profiling boards and their members, there is, as you say, a propensity to need to manage things out of the box or off-piste, slightly odd, and bringing them back to some clarity around cost, timeline, scope, expectations and benefits is the task. Brilliant. I think, Jeremy, if you just move us on, I'll summarize extremely quickly just to then see if we've got some questions. So what are you taking out of today, group? We want you to go away and diagnose where your digital strategy is at, where its vulnerabilities exist, ask powerful questions and talk to people around that. Think about problem solving, probably at two tiers. At the level of defining problems with your board and working through those in engagement, and how you are creating problem solvers in your organization around digital strategy, particularly surfacing quick wins, and then strengthening. If you use this session for anything, strengthen your business case, your digital strategy, your discussions at board right now, using some of the guidance we've given you. And then finally, just to say, Smart Impact is available, as a strategic thought partner someone to be a soundboard for advice technically, or indeed in some of these strategic areas. So do please reach out. I'll do a quick check, Jeremy. We've done a lot of sharing. Are there questions from the group?
I'm not sure I've actually seen any come in, Matt. I mean, there's plenty of time for folks still here if they want to raise a question to do so. Or of course, we can pick things off, pick things up offline if that is preferable.
Yes. So I think there's one preset question which we could share, and then you're right. If anyone does have a burning question, we can add it, and then certainly you're available afterwards. I have the question here around challenge. So maybe briefly, Jeremy, how do you support a client where there's a very active challenge, either in getting a business case or strategy approved, or downstream when you're giving a governance update? How do you engage with clients to support challenges at board level?
Yeah, I think, Matt, it's probably about working out what the root issues are. So really understanding and helping your client to understand what the root challenges and issues are that they're addressing, and then equipping people ahead of meetings, to be able to deal with things effectively. I think one of the things about boards is that quite often the board meeting itself is a sort of a performance of sorts, right? It's where things get agreed and rubber stamped, and a lot of the hard work and the hard miles go into addressing challenges ahead of those board meetings. So engaging with stakeholders, working out what concerns are, making sure that you're well prepared by the time you get to that meeting to address those challenges correctly. And so I suppose advising customers to do that, bringing our insight and expertise around anything that we're good at, Matt. I don't say digital technology, but technology strategy, how others have overcome those problems to the table so that we can provide evidence and rationale to those answers. So everything's not just theory, probably very, very important. And then encouraging, as I think you said, candor, transparency, honesty, and really sort of trying to get to the heart of issues rather than avoiding the difficult conversations.
Yes.
I don't actually think often that falls on Smart Impact to do. It often falls on those senior leaders that we're working with to actually do that. But being a supportive partner, being an insightful partner, absolutely can help.
And I think I might offer one final takeaway around that, which is my experience is culturally, you might not demand suppliers' presence at board for updates, particularly mid-project. However, in my experience, it's effective. Suppliers do behave in the room, and also when there's a key technical question, they are very powerful. And also doing that collaboration before you hit a board update with your supplier is really, really a good idea. So a couple of things. Chris is going to share a quick feedback pulse now. We'd really love to hear what you thought about the session. And indeed, if you want some further contact around these themes. And then we are pretty much heading towards wrapping up, and we'll just share a couple of things we've got on offer for you to avail of as you leave the session. So we won't share the results, but we'll take a moment now to receive them. We're live feedback on how we've done today. And if you do have some real critical needs at the moment where Smart Impact can help, please do say. And then I think when you're ready, Chris and Jeremy, we will have a quick look at two things we can also point people at, which will help. I think the first is a digital health check that Smart Impact offers. There is a recording of this video if you can't get to the QR code now, but it is on screen, and you'll be taken to a way you can actually request one of those. Really good, free and kind of health check based in terms of where your digital strategy and your digital tools are right now.
Yeah, so building on the content today, really, if you have any specific issues that you'd like to discuss, any initiatives coming up that you want to talk confidently to your board about, let us know and see if that's something that we can support you with. And just to say, we regularly run webinars. Our next one is actually just after Easter on the 14th of April. We normally do them at Tuesday 9:30, as we have today. welcome and encourage everybody to join us for those events in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope it was a helpful and insightful session, and we'll look forward to seeing you at a future event. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.